I will be talking today about Elixir configuration and other lies that we tell ourselves about Elixir. And first start with who I am. I was partially introduced, but I am a member of EEF Observability Working Group. I am also part of OpenTelemetry team that is working on Erlang implementation and Elixir implementation. I authored the Elixir logger for Elixir 1.10 and further, and I maintain a few libraries more or less popular in Elixir world. First thing in this talk is that simple not equal easy, and some stuff that I say over here may be weird for some people because it will why are you telling that it is hard but I find why you say it is complex but I find it easy. And the thing is that easy is subjective and complexity and simplicity is objective thing. You can have complex system that will be easy, and you can have simple system that will be hard. Like, for example, assembler is simple but it's hard, and Elixir is, we'll see, is complex but is fairly easy. So recently I have bought a drill for my woodworking stuff, and in the box with the drill I have found one of the that is probably for me one of the most important things that any developer ever can read, and this thing is user manual of anything you want. So on the surface, the user manuals are like boring things. There are like, okay, this is a button, this button does thing and stuff like that. But when you go through the surface of the manual, you will find that it is not that easy task to write manual. Why? Because what makes good manual? Making good manual is enormous task that is quite hard, because you must assume that your reader knows nothing about stuff you are going to do. It can be alien from the outer space who doesn't even know what button is. It will not understand any of the symbols on your device because have no cultural background for it. So you need to explain every single element. The only thing you can assume is that the reader of your manual will know how to read. So that's one of the things that is very important and very hard in writing user manuals. An additional thing is that your manual must be terse as possible. You cannot include the information that is not important over there because it will be too long. Even if your manual has 3 or 5 pages, most people will not read it at all. Just how often you read any manual of the stuff that you have received? Maybe if it is like very hard stuff, like, I don't know, car, and you want to know how to change bulbs in your lights or whatever. But in general, you just pick it out of the box and you start using it, because partially you know how to use it, but partially you don't want to go through all that synthetic text of user manual. User manual also it must contain direct examples of how you want to achieve your things. Like, there are images of stuff you are going to do. There are clear descriptions. First, push this button and you cannot assume that someone will know how to push, which button to push. And obviously it must describe everything that can be done and what can be changed inside your device. So that came, how does apply to us, the programmers, the developers and stuff, so on? Because when you look on the surface, then your users, it is user experience, it is stuff for designers, for the UX people, or whoever you have in your team. But the thing is that the end users of your applications aren't the only users of your applications. You can think as a user, the sysop or DevOps team, the people who will deploy your application, who keep it running, SRE and stuff, and so on, are also people who are users of your application for some definition of user. The testers are users of your applications. They are trying to use it not only as end users, but also as partially sysops, DevOps developers, because they need to run your application, configure it properly, and so on and so on. And also, other developers are also some kind of users of your applications. When someone new came to your team, then you need to explain to them how the application works, what is going on, what they need to configure, what they need to set up for start to work on your system. And that makes the thing, when I said it must describe our functionalities. So how many configurable options you have in your application? How many small things you need to change, to configure, to set up, to make it to make application works? How long is your config.ex file? And how many of these pieces of things in your application are really changeable? How many of these things will be ever configured for a different value than it is in your development environment? If it is not changeable, then in most cases it should not be there, because it is just a craft that is not needed for your stuff, for your application. This is something that will only bring noise and will make your users complain about configurability and managing your application. And when we look at the Elixir, there are very many places where you can configure your application. There is a config/config.ex, there is config/releases.ex that is not really used anymore. There is, but you still can use it if you want. There is config/runtime.ex. There is application function that can contain env key, where you can also provide your configuration for your system. There you can use project configuration for your compile time configuration. So there are very many places where you can, where not only you can, but you must look to understand what the system is requiring for it to run. And this is a simple example of config file in Elixir. And what we can see over here is that we repeat twice my project, because that's how Elixir configuration and Erlang configuration works. It is per application environment. There we can see also that the bar value of configuration will be merged with So we will have bar buzz and bar queues in our result configuration. Also, I mentioned that we can use application in our mix file to have some environment. And we'll talk about it a little bit later, but for now, just believe me, it is often stuff that is, I rarely see that any Elixir developer even know about stuff like that. It is something that is quite obscure, but if you ask for an Erlang developer, then most of them will understand it out of the box. There will be no problem because it is what we use. So what is all of our current Elixir configuration? It is regular Elixir code. You can write your code, you can write your configuration. It is just easy like that. You can, the configuration will be recursively merged with previous values, like we have seen just a moment ago, where you have a map in your configuration or a keyword list or whatever, and it will be merged with values that you have set previously. And it is easy to add new configuration values because it is like one line. You can just config name of the application and then the key and value. And this is like the easiest thing what can be happening. But it all comes up with a price. Like configuration, our configuration is regular Elixir code. So, and even worse, it is not just regular Elixir code, it is imperative Elixir code with some, let's say, declarativity on top, like the merging stuff. So you don't need to care about merging it manually. But that brings us with one thing. If our configuration is code, then and Elixir is Turing complete language, then we have halting problem over there. There's no guarantee. We cannot check programmatically that our configuration will ever be done. It is like we trust this, okay, don't do the stuff. But we cannot guarantee that it will don't do the stuff. Merging existing values mean that the resetting of value that we already set is sometimes hard. Like Oban is allowing us to set plugin list to nil instead of empty list, because if we set it to the empty list, then it will be merged with existing values, which mean that it will be just concatenated with our previous list. And as we are appending empty list to our list, it is just no operation. So we need to not only provide such option, we also need to document such option that setting value to nil will behave just like the list. And the thing is that if you are using the application function from your mix.ex file and you use configuration, it will not be merged. It will be merged only and only if it is in your config.ex file or config. Or runtime.ex. So mix treats the files in config directory in special way. So that can be confusing to people that will learn and try to use the application like it is used in Erlang code. Another thing is that if your application was started before your application was applied, And as we can say, as we said earlier, it is Elixir code, so we need to run Elixir application. So if we want to run Elixir application, we need to run two very important applications in OTP: standard library and kernel. The thing is that the Erlang logger currently resides in kernel, which means that it is configured before our configuration will fire, which means that if we change configuration options for our logger, for Erlang logger, from within Elixir configuration during development, this configuration will not be applied. It will be there. You will be able to read it and wonder why it doesn't work, but it will not be applied, at least for now, because some time ago I created a pull request that will allow us to reconfigure logger. But still, the thing is that our expectations about configuration aren't met fully, because you cannot configure some applications despite you can configure almost everything else. And as I said, Elixir also will reconfigure some of the applications that it knows that are there. Like, for example, logger will be restarted, I believe. Elixir itself will be reconfigured because when, for example, you want to provide Elixir time zone database, it will be reconfigured by the mix, but not all applications will be reconfigured because not all of them can be reconfigured. This also, as our configuration is Elixir code, this means that we can run any Elixir function from there or Erlang functions. And as, for example, we can do network connections, and we can, for example, open a SSH server to our system. So, for example, if we, for some reason, we want to decide that our application will drop super user permissions during the configuration option, and then someone will add SSH, we can just have an SSH shell that for super user. So there's also the thing that there is no clear distinction between compile time and runtime configuration. Like, have any one of you ever encountered that, for example, you added custom MIME format to your MIME library, and then your whole pipeline broke because it was cached somewhere that the MIME library was already using some old values? And I had that recently. I needed to reconfigure all my CI pipeline to always recompile MIME library because I added my custom MIME to provide our application with values that are meaningful for us. And the additional thing is that it is easy to add values there. It is very easy to add new values to your configuration, which is very compelling. You want to add the new values there, and that means that many libraries, especially in the early Elixir days, were created where the whole configuration was stored in configuration instead of providing it during the runtime. Are also other things like configuration is loaded only for our loaded applications, which sometimes, so that means if you do typo in your config first key, then it will be not loaded. You will be not informed about that. At least I believe, because I didn't do the check for that for some time. And also, if you have application like that in development, but not in production, then sometimes that will be like, there will be that problem where some configuration options aren't available during the release. Also, not all values can be used as configuration values. For example, you cannot use function. You cannot use lambda or anonymous function as configuration value. You cannot use imported function if you are not using the remote capture. If you do remote capture, it can be stored, but not if it is local call. And the only way to interpret the configuration to understand what is going on and what will be the values is you need to run it. So you need to trust this code to check what this code does. So Turing complete configuration is compelling, but it will bring you pain. It is like you always will find that something somewhere can break, and you will then be digging for it for days. So what is my proposal? I don't really know. I have some approach that I will talk a little bit later, but in general, I think there is no easy solution to this problem. We can make it bad or more bad, but there will be no clear winner for that will fit all the use cases. So important thing is that compilation in Elixir is not different from running a script. And as mix.ex is script and it run all the code in, I see I done some bad things about order in my presentation, so I will go. Okay, so my approach to configuration is avoid making configuration whenever you can. If this can be set to fixed value, then do it. If it will be not change, not even once, then make it fixed value somewhere in your code. And if you need to configure something, do it in callbacks provided by libraries like Ecto and Phoenix provide init callback that will allow you to not only make it configurable, it will not only allow you to read values, but it will also allow you to do stuff like socket activation from systemd, which I talk in my earlier presentations, and I have blog post about it. You can do like, for example, providing configuration function for your database to fetch configuration from your storage, secret storage for each connection. Like, for example, you are using how it was called in Vault from HashiCorp, and you want to fetch configuration from there. You can do it over there, like provide that function over there, and it will be called, it can be private and stuff, whatever stuff you want. And if anything, if you need to do a configuration, do it like in a way that to provide a sensible configuration defaults, where you can simply set this to this value and not ever care about it. Just like, and in production it can broke, because like not all the local host configuration options will make sense, but if it break in production and it is sensible for the developer, then it is, from my experience, it is much easier to introduce new people to the team. And I think that it is more important than because in production you'll do it once or twice. You don't change the configuration in production that often, and in development, the configuration options change a lot. Dump mocks, if something can be made dumbest in the configuration, then, for example, like you need to provide some secret, then maybe all zeros will fit. Then you will have value that is somehow proper, and you'll be able to debug all your stuff more easily. And I use application function in mix.ex for whenever I can. For me, it makes most sense to provide defaults there and change it when in releases whenever I need to. But in most cases, I can just omit that configuration option and it will be set to default. And obviously avoid compile time configuration, because it makes your compile stuff and your application much harder to understand what's going on. So Elixir compilation is not different from running script. Mix.ex is also configuration. It is like another stuff that you are running, where you can configure your application, configure your stuff, do weird stuff. And the main problem with mix.ex is that it needs to compile before you fetch your dependencies. So you cannot use dependencies in mix.ex. You cannot call function that is not existing over there, especially if this project configuration. And that provides us with many poor stuff. But at the other hand, you can fetch configuration for, you can run, for example, SSH from mix.ex because it is in OTP. So if the library is over there, you can call it, but if it is not there, you cannot call it. So for example, if someone will add dependency to your code, fetch it, and then change mix.ex to require that dependency, then it will work on their machine, but not on any new machine over there, because the dependency is not there yet. So Elixir may be easy. It is like, for me, it is very easy language. It is easy to grasp. It is easy to understand. It is easy to get into it. It is easy to get into the speed. You can quite easily write stuff, and there is more and more projects that make it even easier than it was before. It is easy to start a new Phoenix project, to have an interactive UI with live view, and so on and so on. But it is important that Elixir is not simple. We have a lot of complexity hidden in this language, like macros, which are, it's for itself, it is a can of worms where we can do stuff that is non-intuitive for any other part of your code. Elixir, for example, ecto queries, a good example of that, where you change behavior of some operators. In this example, pin operator in your application, you cannot use outer variables without pinning them. But if you understand Elixir outside of ecto, then the code in ecto queries make no sense. It is like, honestly, I love ecto queries. It is just like, it is not the simple. It is not simple. It can be easy if you read the documentation, but it's not simple. Elixir, people don't understand that the unquote rules, where sometimes you can unquote stuff, and sometimes you cannot, especially inside the functions, to make it compile time only, and sometimes it will be runtime only. So it is very important to remember that while we probably all love and use Elixir and find it very easy language for us, it is not simple language at all, and there is a lot of complexity hidden from us, and a lot of complexity that will can often bite us, especially within configuration. And I believe this is all from me. If there are any questions, then I will be willing to answer. I can check if there is something on over.
Oh, hey, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for the talk. We have one question that I saw this on Hoover. The question was, how do you handle configs in an umbrella project?
So the stuff is that current approach where you create new, in general, I don't like, and I try to avoid using umbrellas because they bring a lot of complexity that in most cases is not really needed when you want to have an umbrella project. The umbrella project makes sense only if you have non-uniform releases. So you have one release, multiple releases from the same repository. Otherwise, the umbrella will bring on you pain and suffering. And if you and current approach in Elixir to umbrella application and Phoenix to umbrella applications, where you have one config.exs for whole your system, is, I think, the best one right now, where you do not split it into too many files and you just keep it everything inside your root directory, because the config in your dependencies is not something that will be fetched and used in your application. So if you are using, for example, the application environment within mix.ex file, then it will be merged into the root of your release. It will be used in your releases, but in the dependencies of your project. But in this example, I prefer to have only the config file only in root of the project.
Thank you, Luke.